Hey everybody, it's Friday, June the 7th, 2024, and this is How to Restart a Church, a spin-off podcast where I, Pastor Trey Comstock, my friend and colleague, Pastor Emily Larson, talk about how to make church happen and how to make church happen again. This week if there's starting to be like very clear genres of this show. There are the cool interview shows. There are the weird statistics shows. And then there are the, hey, there's some really cool things happening in the world of church shows. And this is another in the genre of, hey, there are some really cool things happening in church shows. And this time, specifically, there's some really cool things happening in the United Methodist Church show. And so specifically, we're going to talk about two different United Methodist, what now gets called fresh expressions, which are these like, hey, what if we do like everything deliberately differently? And so one that's really near and dear, in some ways this also falls into genres of things that are near and dear to my heart and things that are near and dear to Emily's heart.
Yes.
Right, yeah. And
these are both things we would do.
So the Reverend Matt Stout of Garden City United Methodist Church, which is part of the South Georgia Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church, has launched a Dungeons and Dragons based ministry, not at the church, but at what appears to be like the local game store. It's like going to the local game store and running a blend of like, we play D&D together, and we do prayer requests, and we relate biblical concepts in D&D terminology, and D&D, like using D&D as like a framework for processing things, as well as just like straight up playing Dungeons and Dragons. And so we'll post the article about both of these things, but the article from South Georgia Conference here is really interested because like there is like this definite spiritual component of they are lifting up prayer concerns, right? This has a lot of the elements of very classic John Wesley style small group where you are like checking, you are not just like gathering pointlessly, you are gathering deliberately to check in on one another, right? One of the things that he says in this article, our time of lifting up prayer concerns is what really has grown our connection to each other. Like, yeah, that makes total sense. But it also relates a story of like a guy that was kind of on the fence, like didn't really get the like Bible story thing until it got reiterated in Dungeons and Dragons terms, and then it clicked for him, right? So that it is this, like, again, it is this, in some ways, like we talked about, that really cool nightclub in Tennessee. We've talked about a lot of these kinds of projects. And this is clearly something that Matt Stout understands. He understands Dungeons and Dragons. He understands how to frame it all in a way that does actually communicate a faith message, but is doing so in an totally alternate location, right? Some of the folks that are interacting with this ministry are never going into a church, even if they are going into a church to play Dungeons and Dragons. They're just probably not going to do that. That's not their space. And so the game store is not unknown territory to Matt. And so he is entering into a space where he feels like he belongs, where other people who are not churchy people also feel like they belong, and then can translate something core about a religious experience, about learning something about the biblical narrative, learning something about the concept of God, also connecting with one another spiritually, prayerfully, meaningfully, doing all of that, which is really core to the church experience, in a game shop via Dungeons and Dragons, which, by the way, took a lot of flack in the 80s for being from the devil.
I love that, though. But it's like, what if your dungeon master was also a biblical theologian? It's like, what if
Yeah.
you could take the story of Paul and Paul's journey, except now there's orcs and elves, and the things that they talk about in this article are so cool. I would play this Dungeons and Dragons game. This is so neat. But just
Well,
thinking about the types of people that reaches. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is, you and I have used tabletop roleplay
Yes.
as a way to reach folk. Like when we relaunched Young Adult Ministry at Grace, God, years ago now, they would because they liked me, they would tolerate the Bible study. But that was clearly not jiving with them. And they were all listening to one of the big actual play podcasts. I don't remember which one now. And so they understood, well, they didn't know how to play D&D, but they understood the idea of D&D. So we didn't actually use Dungeons & Dragons, because unless you know D&D, it's like a foreign language. We used Blades in the Dark, which is frankly just an easier system to comprehend. But we did biblically themed, like, stories. And so, like, one of the stories was, like, you ended up exploring the Garden of Eden. You were, like, these, like, demon slayers, but then you would, like, go in, they ended up in, like, the Garden of Eden. Or one was, like, Noah, and they ended up in, like, a giant mech thing as, like, the fighting sea creatures as Noah's Ark went overhead. And that, like, they connected with it. And they would, every once in a while, when, like, a spiritual concept, you would see someone go, oh, I see what we're doing here. Okay. Oh, I get it. Right. But it wasn't like you have to strike that balance of, like, you can't just, like, hit people over the head with it. This cannot be like a Christian children's cartoon, which is often just the most obvious stuff in the world. So anyways, there's, like, a subtle dance of, like, let's make this an interesting role play. Let's not make this, like, so obvious, but, like, let's weave some things in. But this was still just, like, young adults we already knew, and then they would, like, bring some cool friends. But it started with a core of people that were comfortable in church. Where this takes Dungeons and Dragons based ministry the next step further is let's do this in the game shop. Let's do this in a place where Dungeons and Dragons people are naturally comfortable, and maybe they will see something, the actual meaningful content of this, because we're now in a space where the barrier to entry for them is far lower.
Yes. And the part of this that looks so much like church, I know it doesn't look like church to some generations, but this is church. This is community building. This is a small group. This is Wesley's class meetings and band meetings. It's just in a game store instead of in a home or instead of in a church. And so we've talked a lot on this show about that building of community.
Yeah. Well, and also content-wise, it's not that different from when I ran, like, a Christian playwrights circle. Right? Like, I've been a part of communities where what we did is we wrote Christian short plays and performed them. I helped lead a group at the Candler School of Theology where we wrote some very rebellious religious literature. And once I ended up in a coffin for, like, an hour, because it wasn't quite a coffin, it was like a box, because we'd written this thing for, like, the 100th anniversary of Candler. And most of you don't know Candler's Chapel, and you're probably the better for it, but it's in the round. It's a box. It's not, there's no, like, chancel. And so there's no entry point or exit point that's covered. And we wanted to have this thing where I have been trapped in this box, and then I'm banging on the lid, and then I come out. Well, the only way to do that and have it work is to wheel me in the box when we're getting set up, and then have me lie in that box as the crowd is coming in, as everyone is being seated, as the program is started, and only come out of the box on cue. Of course. So I was in that box. And so, like, again, like, we put the box on wheels. And so then backstage in a hallway, I got into the box, and then I was in that box for, no exaggeration, like 45 minutes. And so that is not that different from Christian D&D. I just happen to be
Right.
the theater kid version of that. But this is, as he talks about, I had this in the article, right? It creates an opportunity for authentic discussion about spirituality, about morality, about the human experience, right? Like D&D is trying to model a framework of going on a quest and
Yes.
model, like in a real way, like model human life. And so as you're going on a quest, you are like, hey, what does it mean that we're taking these actions? How do we face these problems? How do we unpack this? Like D&D as a storytelling mechanism can apply itself to any genre of story. And if you want to put in elves and half-elves and halflings and orcs and wizards, and heck yeah, let's go. Because
Go for
those
it.
two are people who can go on spiritual, moral, emotional journeys that can relate, deeply faithful concepts.
I feel like this is the kind of group that, what was the group of writers that used to meet? So C.S. Lewis and J.R.R.
Yes,
Tolkien
yeah,
and all of
yeah.
those contemporaries. Like, this is a type of thing that they would do. This is the
Yes.
type of thing they did. And we look at
This is
their
essential.
time
Yeah.
and their group and all of the writings that came from that as this great piece of literature, as Christian literature. Even there's so many parallels to Christian literature in what they wrote. This is like the next version of that, right? I wonder if we actually wrote down what this D&D was creating, if this would become the next.
Well, and this is one of those hilarious things. So I've actually been to that pub. So it's Eagle and Child.
Yes.
It was actually very near my college in Oxford. So it's on the north side of Oxford. I got thrown out of that pub, actually. Fun fact.
Lovely.
Not for anything interesting, but because they decided the barkeep decided it was Pick on American night, because this was the late 2000s in Britain, and so Americans, not our stock, not at the highest. And like they didn't want this is also back when like taking credit card in pubs was like really weird, but my access to British money was really weird. And then although I was clearly over the age of 18, he wanted me to have an ID. And so then anyways, I ended up not in the Eagle and Child. But anyways, I've been to that pub. Yeah, and so what's interesting about that is so J.R.R. Tolkien is a linguist and C.S. Lewis is a theologian. And they're both writing, like, they would both say that it's not allegorical literature, but, like, literature that expresses concepts. One about Christian theology, one about industrialization. But it's so D&D is deeply influenced by Tolkien's work. Tolkien is deeply influenced by his good friend and part of this writer circle, C.S. Lewis. And so C.S. Lewis helped shape J.R.R. Tolkien, whose works then go on to shape D&D. And so there's like a real like A to B to C of C.S. Lewis indirectly influences the development of D&D at all. And now here we are, this crew is deploying D&D to teach biblical concepts, something that C.S. Lewis would absolutely love. It is, it's absolutely wonderful. And
fantastic.
And it goes back to what is becoming one of the themes that we are learning is, hey, do what you know. Don't like invent like, oh, this is what the kids are into, therefore I will be into it. Do not do this. This will scares the children. This is, oh, I too love D&D. How can I use this story? And it's not hard. Like, it's not hard intellectually when you wrap your head around it as a storytelling medium. How do I utilize the storytelling medium to tell stories? Well, okay, shoot.
Right.
Like
building intentional community around the thing that you already know and love. Absolutely.
But I also think it gets at, like, have a life. This was one of the best pieces of preaching advice I ever got too. Was like, how do you preach interesting sermons? How do you have interesting things to talk about in sermons? How do we have things that we can freshly express? Well, it helps if you live a life that's interesting.
Outside of the walls of the church.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
That it
Go
helps
have
that, like,
hobbies.
if you go have hobbies that are like, a lot of my own. This is probably a weird thing to admit, but it's true. I watch almost nobody else's preaching. I
Yeah.
watch, I watch almost no preaching. I have to watch my own because I edit our videos. So I watch some of my own stuff. But other than I watch almost no preaching, I watch other things, other
Yes.
genres. A lot of it
Yes.
like comedy. So that I am not just using the same six preacher tricks, have the same six ideas about this. Like, I research the scripture, but I'm researching like commentaries and linguistics
Yes.
and for a piece that I wrote today, the gold rush in California in 1849. Spoilers for next week's essay. You're going to be learning about the gold rush in 1849. But like, this is similar of like, don't let your only hobby be church. Like, go
Right.
and live your life. I think about,
Yes.
we didn't call this a fresh expression, then there wasn't a word for it in 2011, or earlier than that, like 09, 010. But the pastor of the church I attended that ran the contemporary service, the associate at Pender, left the church to go start a ministry on her sailboat. What she realized is like
Groovy.
boat marinas. This is not a thing that I would know at all as a very land-based person. The ocean is historically terrifying. It is the embodiment of chaos itself. It's terrifying. I like to look at the ocean. I do not wish to be on it. She did. God love her. And so she started a ministry. And I don't think this is like affiliated with the church. I think this was just like she got a bee in her bonnet to go do it. And she went and did it. Of, I am going to be like a chaplain we're going to live on our boat. And then I'm going to be like a chaplain at like marinas. Because
awesome.
that's a whole bunch of people that the church isn't reaching, that you don't have entree because we're land lovers. And
Right.
so she was going to go where the land lovers wouldn't. And
All right.
again, we didn't have like, but it was that same, like, this is the thing that she profoundly understands and sees that there's this unreached group of people that she profoundly gets, and she's equipped to naturally enter that space.
Yes.
You and I have a buddy of ours who's deeply into Ren fairs. I am also into Ren
Yes.
fairs, but these people are more into Ren fairs than I am.
Really into Ren
and what
fairs,
I keep,
yes.
And what I keep saying is, dude, that's your mission. That's the mission field. Like,
Yes.
get a dope Friar Tuck outfit and go
Yes.
be Friar Tuck
In real life.
and do that organically in real life. Go be Friar Tuck.
Yes. Yes.
Like, not just cosplaying as Friar Tuck. Like, that's a mission field that you are not going to be like, I have heard about Ren fairs, but like, oh, no, I totally understand this world. I am of this world. I speak the
Yes.
language of this world. I will now go be, and friar as usual, right? Friars are the ones out in the community. Go be a
Yes.
literal friar.
An actual
go
friar.
be a Friar Tuck. Go be an actual friar. Or go be a half elf, or go be a halfling. Be a halfling. World needs more halflings. Introducing my son is now Hobbit curious.
Very nice.
I think this is going to be a great summer.
Yes.
And how we did it was the ancient music video. They're taking the hobbits to Isengard. If you watching
Really?
the show have not, just Google, no, not Google, put into YouTube. They're taking the hobbits to Isengard. It is an
Yes.
amazing music video. We showed him that, which then got him interested in hobbits, which made me now I get to spend my summer introducing my now 9-year-old to Lord of the Rings. It's a good.
Oh, that's going to be a
good
great
moment.
summer. Fabulous.
It's a great
Fabulous.
summer. So speaking of a great summer, we have another one. It turns out I could just talk about this all day.
Yes.
So the church at Spring Forest. So this is led by the abbess, is United Methodist clergy and professor Elaine Heath, who was at the Perkins School of Theology and actually trained some of the people that like have then trained us, and
Yes.
is now at Duke Divinity School. So she and some folks launched like an intentional monastic community that has a farm, like a 23-acre farm in North Carolina, and
So cool.
does like a whole bunch of things, some of which look a lot like church, and some of which look a lot less like church, and all of it is obviously church. And she's also become one of the leaders of the Fresh Expressions movement. But like one of the things they do is there's like an intentional community aspect of it. And so like they gather every morning on Zoom and pray and worship. And they do periodic like worship services for the community, but in ways that don't conflict with other church schedules if you want to be a part of other churches. And they all have like farm jobs, right? Like Elaine keeps the goats. And so there's that part of it. There's also like a whole community outreach part where they're just like teaching families about nutrition and opening up just like free space for the community to come and enjoy green space. And for like they're doing a whole like immigrant resettlement like thing with folks from Afghanistan, and so folks from there are coming in and learning about growing their own food and making smoothies and doing fun children's activities. And then there are like more explicitly spiritual stuff, and so it's they're using this farm as a venue from everything from like no explicitly faith content, but just like, hey, here's like a really great event for you and your kid to come to and get some really tasty, healthy food, learn some things, be out in nature, right? So there's that end of the spectrum to we are an intentional religious community who gathers in prayer and worship every day at 8 a.m. And this venue, this farm, let me use the right word because it's great, this farmistery.
I love
Which, by the
this
way,
term,
yeah,
pharmastery.
it's great. It's great. It's also because we, as like 21st century Christians, don't understand monasteries. All monasteries were farmisteries. They all were.
Yes.
That's how they lived.
Yes, they were.
But I digress. But it's a great, and so it is this, farm as venue. Farm as engine of economy, right? They have a community-supported agriculture, and so there's like a baked-in sustainability piece of we grow food, we sell food gives us money to run this program. Hey, it's like a farm. It's like a farm is inherently a business, and so they run the farm as a business. Like it is a for real farm, but also it is this engine for a wide variety of onboarding points for let me have something that looks like a meaningful community experience in this space with the open-ended of and we see what goes from there.
Yes. I love this. I would live on a farmistery. I want to start a farmistery. I think it would be fantastic. This is what all of my homesteading community is. This is what all of the homesteading community is striving towards. Is this? People call it self-sufficiency, but really it's not. It's community based. It's supporting one another with intentional community. Just it happens to be around food and producing food, whether that be agriculture, animals, plants, gardens, whatever. The production of gathering around the table because, and I think they mentioned it in the article where there's something so sacred about gathering around the table because everybody does. Everybody has to eat. And so intentionally creating space at your table for people to come and encounter whatever spiritual aspect you are introducing them to that day. There are so many ways to incorporate it. Not to mention, this is also where a lot of our parables come from, because how many people nowadays would actually understand, parables about sheep or vineyards without ever having been around sheep or a vineyard, right?
We've done a lot of bits on this show about how little I understand sheep farming. I do not the amount of agricultural stuff that I don't understand is legion. And most of what I learned about agriculture, I learned from Jesus. But that also means that we did this bit about the good shepherd, right? Like no
Right.
shepherd actually acts that way. That's the point. The point isn't
Right.
that a good shepherd would like sack the entire everybody for the sake of the one or die, right? If the shepherd dies, the whole agribusiness blows up. It's about no shepherd would actually do that. That's how amazing God is, right? Like
But
rehashing a bit from months ago, but this is true.
yes. But how much could we all learn from spending more time around sheep and vineyards and honeybees and all of the other references that Christ gives in the parables in the New Testament? All of these examples that were given. I mean, there's a reason, and it's because we all gather around food. Still, all of these things are important to our well-being and our life. Still, and it gives people the opportunity to meet a very real, very physical need for their community. It's the idea behind food pantries, but going a step further, right? It is
It's
providing for your community with intentionality.
Like I think the difference is not that we should do fewer food pantries. But we talked about this with Kyle Tremblay when he was on, right? When they talk about like, hey, the Wesley does a food pantry, and that's great. And that is inherently good. But also, they have used it as a way to have meaningful and open-ended conversations with people, right? One of the because it's resettlement ministry from a lot of folks from the Middle East. So you have a lot of people who are not Christian, who are Muslim, who are finding not like proselytizing or whatever, but just finding like a nice, caring community space where they feel like they can exist without those expectations. It's Kyle's agnostics and atheists, right? Of just like, hey, no pressure. Like, hey, be here. Here's the thing we're doing. Here's a cool, like, just lovely community thing we're doing. Oh, we care about you. ... Let's see where that goes. But even that is meaningful. Right? But this gets at, a larger conversation about like you are what you measure, when what you measure is like church attendance and professions of faith and giving, which are the, core metrics of your mainline denomination. That's what you become. And so this, one of the things that a fresh expressions mindset, I think, does is, we're totally divorced from all that measuring all of that. What we're interested in is meaningful interactions. That's the metric, is like and like a meaningful interaction can be, you are an immigrant from Afghanistan, you came, your kid picked some strawberries and ate them and like made a cool smoothie, and you learned about nature and got to just be outside, and you got to be more connected to your food, and you learned a cool thing from a dietitian. Cool.
Yes.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Or a meaningful connection to be like, oh, I want to take my faith, my Christian faith, super deep. I'm going to meet with a crew of my fellow farm-based weirdos, positive, complimentary, farm-based weirdos, complimentary, every morning at 8 a.m. Every morning at 8 a.m., I'm going to do this. Before I do anything else, I'm going to meet with these, my beloved weirdos, complimentary. And like, all of that can be contained within this thing. It is, there's a line that despite the deep Christian commitments of its core members, Spring Forest sees itself as collaborating with people from other faith traditions or no faith tradition. That it is, again, one of the, like the D&D, like Kyle's ministry at Lamar University, it is setting up that breadth, that the future of one of the angles for the future of this thing we call church is going to be is rapidly becoming something far more open-ended. And that can, for a certain mindset, that can feel really unsatisfying. Right? What? You're not getting the baptisms. You're not getting the whatever. Well, maybe you're not. Maybe you will. We don't know, right?
Huh.
The whole point of open-ended is it's open-ended. You don't know where it's going to go.
You don't know what's happening next. Yep. Exactly.
The other thing that these two projects and Kyle and what we've been talking about for the past few weeks, it's got me thinking about, I guess, what this show is meant to make me think about, make us all think about, is what is the future of the church. And I think there will
Mhm.
always be a space for the kind of ministry that we are used to seeing. There will continue to be a space for a contemporary worship service with a killer sound system, with the youth group with 55 good-looking high school kids, with the camps and the ski trips and the
Yeah.
there with the like $1 million youth center and the $1 million children's center. Like that model of
Right.
church works in this century too.
Mhm.
Fewer of them are needed than maybe currently exist. And if you're not that, breaking into that costs millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. And what happens when you don't have million of dollars? Right? When you're not going to be able to go or you would leverage the church with so much debt as to be crippling, a thing I have been through with multiple churches.
Right.
The amount of crippling debt I have either taken on or had or inherited on behalf of churches trying to chase that model, terrifies me.
Too much.
Um,
Yep.
and so what what if you don't have to do that, right? If you're
Right.
already doing that and it works, cool, great. Continue to invest in that in cool and creative ways. We need those
Yes.
spaces as well. There just happen to already be a lot of them. What these ministries are doing is for people that are not going to come into your multi-million-dollar youth center, for people who don't know what a thing called a family life center is and don't really care that you have one. They weren't going to darken your doors before you had it either.
Yeah.
If you change the name of the thing from small groups to life groups, they're still not coming because they're not
Right.
coming. Because this is not a format that works.
Right.
What these fresh expressions, TM, do is they break out of that. They measure differently. They work differently. They go into different spaces. They create different spaces. They create
Mhm.
different feelings and give us an opportunity to reach other people without abandoning the people we've been historically good at reaching. We can continue to be and should continue to be historically good at reaching. There is a need for churches with amazing facilities. There's a need
Yes.
for that. Because that kind of ministry works for millions of people. Awesome. But what about the hundreds of millions of people for whom it doesn't work? That to
need
me
to
is
be
the
able to
question.
walk into their local game store and join a D&D game and also experience the love of God.
Right. That are way more comfortable like wandering a farm and like
Yes.
doing either looking at or doing or both some agriculture. Like that, or is like a starving college student that then realizes that the people handing out the free food are really chill to hang out with too.
Exactly.
I think Kyle said this, and I think I have said this before too. Like it's the ministry of good vibes. Like a lot of
Yes.
at the core of Fresh Expressions is like, what if the vibes were good? Because in a lot of our
Yes.
spaces, the vibes aren't good.
Right.
I've been in charge of, you and I have managed some churches where the vibes weren't good. And you're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, well, we can do a lot of things, but like, yo, the vibes are bad. Like
Yeah.
if they sit in the wrong seat, you're going to kill them and they know it. Even if they don't know it's the wrong seat, they know that someone out there is really weird about the fact that they are there. And that,
Yep.
like, and so there is like all of these things. One of the like, because there's not like a common thread of place or like
Right.
activity, right? It's a bunch of nerds, complimentary, are inside around a table playing in their imagination, and a bunch of weirdos, complimentary, farming, right? These are very
Yes.
opposite activities. And yet they're both about good vibes. And
Yes,
are both
it's all about the good
like an
vibes.
open-ended. Yeah. If you have stories of Ministry of Good Vibes for your weirdos, nerds, whatever, complimentary, email us at thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. That is thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. This and everything we do here in the Servants Now Media Lab is made possible by a generous Innovators Grant for the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. If you want to support us, we could use your help. Like, comment, subscribe, share, tell other people about something you heard or saw in this thing. Leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast. All of that helps us be more sustainable. If you want more of what we do, there's a lot that happens. There's going to be even more happening in the studio as we move into the summer and some new projects get spun up. We have some really exciting plans in the pipeline. Best place right now is youtube.com/servantsnow, facebook.com/servantsnow, or servantsnow.org on the interwebs. And go in peace to love and serve the Lord. We'll see you next time.